Every year, first Monday of May, the most powerful room on earth opens its doors and then immediately closes them. No footage from inside, ever. Not one unfiltered second. Think about that. I was there, and what I saw wasn't a party. It wasn't a fashion event. It was something that took me months to find the right word for. The guest list isn't about fame. It's about function. Every person in that room placed deliberately. Every image leaving that room selected. Every theme decided years in advance. This isn't coincidence. This is architecture. 6 months after that evening, I walked into an ordinary mall, and I saw it. The same shapes, the same silhouettes, on people who had never heard of the Met Gala, who never chose any of this, who thought they were just shopping. The most powerful systems don't announce themselves. They don't need to. They just become the air you breathe, the clothes you wear, the things you find beautiful, without ever asking why. Somewhere between the dinner and the after, between the cameras and the silence, something happens that nobody documents, nobody discusses, and almost nobody questions. Almost. Power doesn't hide in darkness. It hides in plain sight. It hides in beauty. It hides behind the most photographed doors in the world. And it's been doing it for 30 years. You've seen the images. You shared them. You never questioned them. Neither did I. Until I was inside the room. I was there. Once. And I remember the exact moment I realized this wasn't a party. It was the way the doors closed behind me. Every year, on the first Monday of May, the most powerful building in Manhattan becomes the most exclusive room on earth. No public tickets, no open invitations. You don't buy your way in. You get chosen. The Metropolitan Museum of Art hosts the Costume Institute Gala. That's the official name. The public name is simpler, Met Gala. On paper, it's a fundraiser, a charity event for the museum's fashion collection. In 2023, a single table cost $300,000. Think about that number for a moment. Not a ticket, a table. And even with that money, you still might not get in, because money isn't the currency here. So what is? Since 1995, one person has controlled the guest list. Anna Wintour, editor-in-chief of Vogue, chair of the event. She doesn't just approve names, she shapes the room. Every seat is assigned. Every placement is deliberate. Who sits next to whom is not accidental. I didn't understand that the first time I walked in. I do now. There was a moment that evening, something small, something I almost didn't notice. A woman I didn't recognize was moved from one table to another, quietly, minutes before the doors opened to the main hall. At the time, I thought it was a logistical issue. Later, I would understand it was something else entirely. Why does it matter who stands next to whom in a room full of celebrities? It matters because this room isn't about celebration. It's about positioning. The phones are banned. Officially. There are people at the entrance whose only job is to make sure of it. I'd heard about this rule before. It seemed reasonable. Protect the guests, maintain the atmosphere. But inside, I noticed something. The absence of cameras doesn't create freedom. It creates control. When no one is recording, people behave differently. They talk differently. They move differently. The carefully constructed image, the one that floods your screen the next morning, that image is assembled from a single approved source. One photographer, one publication, one perspective. Yours. Ask yourself, when was the last time you saw unfiltered footage from inside the Met Gala? Not the red carpet, not the after party. Inside, the main hall, the dinner. You haven't. Nobody has. I used to think exclusive meant prestigious, that the closed doors were a sign of importance. But standing inside that room, watching the seating plan executed with surgical precision, I started thinking about a different word. Not exclusive, curated. Every person in that room was selected to be there. Every image leaving that room was selected to be seen. The event you watch online the next day, it isn't a window into what happened. It's a frame. And someone decided what goes inside the frame. There was one more thing I noticed that night. The theme. Every year the Met Gala has a theme, a concept, a visual language. That year I remember thinking, why this theme? Why now? I didn't have an answer. I filed it away. And months later, I started seeing that same visual language everywhere. The next morning, the photos went live. Hundreds of millions of impressions, global coverage, every major outlet. Everyone was talking about the outfits. No one was asking who chose them. And no one was asking why these images, at this moment, look exactly like what we'd all be wearing 6 months later. Control doesn't announce itself. It just becomes the norm. There's a photograph from the 2018 Met Gala. A woman standing at the top of the museum steps. Her dress weighs over 50 pounds. Her head is completely covered. Her face, invisible. The crowd went silent when she appeared. Not because it was beautiful, because it felt like something else entirely. Every year, the Met Gala has a theme, not a color palette, not a dress code, a concept. And for the past 3 decades, those concepts have been getting harder to ignore. In 2018, heavenly bodies, Catholic iconography, saints, relics, crosses made of diamonds. In 2019, camp, excess, masks, distortion of the human form. In 2022, gilded glamour, power dressed as elegance. In 2023, Karl Lagerfeld. A tribute to a man who once said, "Fashion is the healthiest motivation for losing weight." Each theme is developed years in advance. Curators, researchers, historians. This is not a mood board. This is an argument. What argument? I started looking at the images more carefully. Not the celebrities, not the designers, the symbols. And once I started, I couldn't stop. Wings. Everywhere. On backs, on shoulders, framing faces like halos. Eyes. Oversized, exaggerated, painted across fabric and skin. Masks. Full face coverings, obscured identities on the most recognizable people on Earth. And transformation. Bodies reshaped, extended, distorted into something not quite human. Fashion critics call this theatricality. Museums call it art as language. Both are right, because language carries meaning, and meaning, repeated often enough, becomes invisible. I remember a specific image from that evening. A mask, entirely gold, covering everything above the jaw. The person wearing it was one of the most photographed people in the world, and yet unrecognizable. At the time, I thought it was a bold aesthetic choice. Later, I asked myself a different question. What does it mean when the most visible people choose to become faceless? I'm still not sure I have the answer. But I know it stayed with me. Here's something the coverage never mentions. The Costume Institute exhibitions, the ones that inspire each year's theme, are researched and designed over 18 to 24 months. That means the visual language you see on the Met Gala red carpet in May was decided before the previous year's event ended. Someone is always thinking 2 years ahead. 2 years ahead of what, exactly? Museums don't just store culture. They frame it. They decide what gets displayed, what gets studied, what gets treated as significant. The Metropolitan Museum of Art is one of the most visited institutions in the world. Its Costume Institute doesn't treat fashion as decoration. It treats fashion as a primary document of human civilization, and the Met Gala is its most public statement. Every image from that night carries the institutional weight of one of the world's most respected cultural authorities. That weight transfers. Think about the last time you dismissed something because it was just fashion. Now think about how many decisions in your life are shaped by what looks normal, what looks aspirational, what looks powerful. I used to believe that fashion reflected culture, that designers responded to the world around them, absorbed the mood, expressed the moment. But the timeline doesn't work that way. The themes are chosen before the mood exists. The images are released before the trends appear. The symbols arrive first. The culture follows. This isn't a reflection. This is a projection. The morning after the 2019 Met Gala, one image dominated every platform. A single look, replicated, referenced, discussed for months. By the following spring, versions of it were in every mid-range retail store on the planet. No one commissioned that. No one coordinated it. It just spread, like language always does. The question is never whether language spreads. The question is, who writes it first? 6 months after the 2019 Met Gala, I walked into a shopping mall in the Midwest. Ordinary place, ordinary people. And I stopped. Because on 3 separate mannequins, in 3 separate stores, I saw it. The silhouette, the exaggeration, the specific shape of a shoulder. Not identical, but unmistakably related, like a dialect of the same language. I stood there for a long time, because I suddenly understood something I hadn't been ready to understand before. This wasn't influence. This was infrastructure. One closed event, one night, one approved set of images. And 6 months later, it's in every mall, every feed, every mirror. The question isn't how it spreads. The question is, why does it need to? The Met Gala generates approximately 600 million social media impressions within 24 hours. Not over a week, not over a month. 24 hours. That number doesn't happen by accident. Every major celebrity in attendance has a team: stylist, PR manager, digital strategy consultant, whose work begins the moment the look is finalized. Posts are scheduled, angles are pre-selected, captions written in advance. The red carpet ends at 9 p.m. By midnight, the narrative is already set. But here's what I didn't understand then. The narrative isn't just about fashion. It never was. Why does a charity fundraiser need a pre-built narrative? Why does a fashion event need a digital strategy consultant? And why does that strategy need to activate within hours, before anyone has had time to form their own opinion? Remember the woman who was moved to a different table minutes before the doors opened? I thought about her again when I started mapping this. Her final seat placed her directly next to 3 of the most photographed people that evening. Every image of them included her. Hundreds of millions of impressions. One quiet decision, made by someone who understood exactly how the night would be documented. At the time, I filed it away as a coincidence. But once you see the pattern, coincidence stops being a satisfying explanation. Someone always knows how the room will be photographed. Before the photographs are taken, Vogue publishes first. Always. Anna Wintour controls both the event and the primary publication that documents it. The curator of the experience is also the curator of the record. From Vogue, the images move outward. Fashion editors reference them. Trend forecasters file reports. Retail buyers adjust orders. But here's what the coverage never mentions. The brands represented at the Met Gala are not passive sponsors. They are stakeholders. A single brand placement on the right body, in the right photograph, in the right publication, generates returns that no traditional advertising campaign can match. We're not talking about millions. We're talking about cultural legitimacy. And cultural legitimacy is worth more than any number. Because it doesn't feel like advertising. It feels like reality. There's a term in behavioral psychology, mere exposure effect. The more frequently you encounter something, the more normal it feels. You don't need to be persuaded. You just need to be exposed. And exposure, at 600 million impressions per night, is something the Met Gala does better than any institution on Earth. What exactly are you being exposed to? Fashion? Or something that uses fashion as its surface? I started looking at the themes differently. Not as aesthetic choices, as announcements, heavenly bodies, religion reframed as glamour, sacred imagery worn by secular gods, camp, the normalization of excess, the celebration of distortion, gilded glamour, power made beautiful, inequality made aspirational. Each theme, developed years in advance, released into culture at a specific moment. Not randomly, not arbitrarily. The question I kept returning to was simple. Who benefits from these particular ideas becoming normal? Within 1 week, trend reports published. Within 1 month, fast fashion begins production. Within 3 months, prototypes reach buyers. Within 6 months, you see it in a mall. Within a year, it no longer looks like fashion. It looks like the world. The spread doesn't need passive consumers. It needs active ones. Every share, every screenshot, every "look at this" sent to a friend. You were the distribution network, not a bystander, a component. And here's the part that genuinely unsettled me. The system wasn't designed despite human behavior. It was designed around it, around the way we share what shocks us, around the way we normalize what we see repeatedly, around the way we mistake familiarity for truth. But the images you saw, the ones that spread across every platform, those came from the official part of the evening, the documented part, the part that was always meant to be seen. Because there's another part. After the dinner ends, after the cameras leave, after the approved photographs are filed. A different atmosphere takes over, and the few people who've spoken about it all use the same word, different. They say it feels completely different, and none of them will explain exactly how. Before we continue, stop for a second. Because everything in this story points toward one question. Write in the comments. One word only. Mirror. If you believe the Met Gala reflects the culture that already exists. Mold. If you believe it actively shapes what's coming. One word. Because your answer will determine how you experience everything in Part 4. There's a moment every year that no one films. Not because it's forbidden. Because by that point, everyone has agreed, without saying a word, that certain things stay inside the room. I know this because I was there when that agreement formed. You don't sign anything. You don't need to. The atmosphere makes it clear. Everything you've seen from the Met Gala was meant to be seen. The question is, what wasn't? The official program ends around 11 p.m. The photographers leave. The press coordinators pack up. The structured part of the evening, the part designed for documentation, is over. What follows has no official name. Insiders call it simply the after. The venue changes. The atmosphere shifts. The careful choreography of the earlier hours dissolves into something less structured, less visible, and significantly less documented. I've spoken to people who've experienced both halves of that evening. Every single one describes the transition the same way. It feels like a different event entirely. Why would a charity fundraiser need a second, private phase? What requires that level of separation? Remember the gold mask, the one worn by someone whose face is recognized by hundreds of millions of people. I kept thinking about it after that night, because in the after, the masks don't come off. Not literally, not always, but the version of themselves that people perform for cameras, that version quietly disappears. And what replaces it is something I'm not sure I have the right language to describe. Not sinister, not dramatic, just unguarded. People who spend their entire public lives carefully managing perception suddenly stop managing it. And in that unguarded space, conversations happen that would never survive the light of a press cycle. Decisions are shaped, alliances are formed, power reorganizes itself. Here's a structural fact that rarely gets discussed. The Met Gala guest list isn't just celebrities. It includes politicians, tech executives, media owners, finance, people whose names don't trend on social media, people whose presence at the event is never mentioned in the coverage. They're there. They're always there. And they're not there for the fashion. What does a hedge fund manager have in common with a pop star at a fashion event? Access to the same room, the same dinner, the same unguarded hours. And access, at that level, is never accidental. The phone ban suddenly reads differently here. Not as a courtesy to guests, as a structural guarantee. No recordings, no accidental captures, no footage that exists outside the approved narrative. What happens in the after stays entirely within the memory of the people present. And memory, unlike video, can be shaped, can be reframed, can be denied. The most powerful people in the world, in one room, with zero documentation. That's not a coincidence of policy. That's a feature. Think about what exists in that room on any given year. Media executives who control what billions of people read. Technology leaders who control what those people see. Political figures who control what those people are allowed to do. All of them. One night. No cameras. And the only record of what was discussed is whatever they choose to tell you. I think the Met Gala serves two purposes. The first is public, visible, documented, spectacular. It shapes culture. It moves markets. It normalizes ideas. The second purpose has no press release. It's the room where the people who shape the public event meet privately, where the curators of culture have dinner with the owners of capital, where influence is not performed, it's negotiated. The fashion is real, the art is real, the charity is real, but they are also the most elegant cover story ever constructed. Beauty has always been the most effective distraction. And here's what I've never been able to resolve. If this is a system, and the evidence suggests it is, then it requires something that no system can function without. Continuity. Someone who was there 30 years ago is still there now. Someone who understood the function of this event before most of its current guests were born. And she never explains herself. She never needs to. Because the most powerful position in any system is the one that never has to justify its existence. I didn't leave that evening with answers. I left with a different kind of vision. The kind you can't switch off. Because once you understand how a room is constructed, you start seeing the construction everywhere. This isn't a story about fashion. It never was. It's a story about who decides what the world looks like, and how that decision gets made to feel inevitable. For a long time, I told myself I was overthinking it, that it was just an event, just clothing, just photographs. But the evidence kept returning. The sealed guest list, the curated imagery, the private hours with no documentation, the themes chosen years in advance, the brands, the politicians, the media owners, all in the same room, all off the record. None of it is secret. All of it is visible. The system doesn't hide. It decorates itself. The woman moved to a different table. The gold mask worn by someone the world recognized but couldn't see. The visual language that appeared on red carpet in May and in retail stores by November. These weren't separate observations. They were parts of the same architecture. Selection, symbolism, distribution, normalization. A four-stage process that begins inside one building in Manhattan and ends inside the minds of people who will never know the Met Gala existed. The most effective systems are the ones you participate in voluntarily. The ones that feel like culture, like taste, like your own personal aesthetic. How much of what you find beautiful was decided for you? Power has always needed a public face. In the medieval era, it was the church. Cathedrals so vast and beautiful that the authority behind them felt divine. In the industrial era, it was architecture, buildings that made capital look eternal. In this era, it's culture itself, fashion, music, film, art. The most sophisticated power structures of the modern world don't announce themselves through force. They announce themselves through aesthetics. They make you want what they need you to want. And the Met Gala, with its closed doors, its curated imagery, its perfect themes, its unrecorded evenings, is one of the clearest expressions of that logic currently operating on Earth. Not a conspiracy, a system. Systems don't require secrecy. They require participation. Go back to part 3 for a moment. The word you wrote in the comments, mirror or mold. I want you to look at it again, because after everything in part 4, does your answer still feel the same? If it changed, write why. If it didn't, write that too. Because the most interesting thing about this system is that reasonable people can watch the same evidence and still disagree about what they're seeing. That's not a bug. That's the design. I still think about that evening. Not the spectacle of it. The quieter moments. The way certain people moved through that room like they owned it. Because in every way that matters, they did. The way the imagery felt inevitable the next morning. Because it had been made to feel that way. The way I walked out thinking I had witnessed something glamorous, when what I had actually witnessed was something much more precise, much more intentional, much more enduring. The most powerful systems in history have one thing in common. They don't look like systems. They look like culture. They look like art. They look like a Monday evening in May, when the most beautiful people in the world climb the steps of a museum, and the doors close behind them. Power has always hidden behind beauty. The only question is, now that you see it, can you unsee it?